Hello watercolor friends, today I'm going to paint a cottage house. So this is the original photograph I'm going to be painting the cottage house from. You will see it will take me a total of 15 minutes approximately to paint this cottage home. So it's a really quick sketch, and you can use this technique also to do your sketchbooks and travel books. I will use an ink pen and then some watercolor. So the whole tutorial is going to be in 3 parts. So the first part is the drawing part. As you can see at the moment, I'm drawing the cottage home, but really it's a very loose sketch. I first prepared like a pencil sketch showing the proportions of the cottage home, and then mostly the windows and the shape of the roof. But then I'm not going to draw the vegetation, and I'm simply going to sketch it using directly watercolor. So it do not need to draw everything with the ink pen. Simply the windows, the shape of the roof, and maybe the main vegetation areas, but that's all. If you start drawing every single leaf with your ink pen, it's gonna take forever, and I'm not really convinced that the result is going to be any better. So that's why I think the looser the better for this sketch. And then the second part of the tutorial is going to be mostly in grayscale. So I'm going to use a mix of blue and brown to create like a gray watercolor. And so I'm going to shade this drawing with this gray. And once it's done, I'm simply going to add the colors on the top of it. Now, it's very important to let it dry. Once you've done the grayscale painting, it's very important to let it dry before adding color on the top of it. Otherwise, the risk is to get like a muddy watercolor, which is not something that you would like. So yeah, as you can see, the drawing is rather simple here because there is not any complex perspective to be taken into account. It's really like a facade of this cottage home. I took the picture in South Wales, so it's a cottage home in South Wales. It's a traditional home, an old house. That's why its shape is a little bit funny, and also as you can see, the roof is made of a particular material, which is a traditional way of making roofs in South Wales. So it's not slate, it's like basically dried grass or whatever. So I'm going to start by adding a light blue sky on the top. So I'll first wet this part of the sheet and then add some blue and let it dry basically. So that's the only color that I'm going to be putting on the first stage of the painting. And then, as I said, I'm going to mix some blue and some brown to get a gray. If you already have a gray in your watercolor palette, then you can simply use it. And so I'll start with the darkest parts, which are the shadows under the roof. And as you can see, quite often I will let my brush lay on the sheet, and so the tip of the brush is going to give me the edge by the roof, and then at the bottom the shadow is going to be flat, and this will let me paint quite a thick shadow without touching too many times on my wash. So the idea here is to give some volume and to suggest the vegetation already, using only gray. And I'll tell you why I'm doing this, because if you go straight with colors, the danger is to put too many colors and too many shades of green and whatever other color you have on your drawing, and make it too color heavy, trying to give volume and shades. So that's why giving it a simple shade with a gray first is going to give the drawing a volume, and then adding a little bit of color would be absolutely enough, just to finish up. As you can see, on the roof we have those rounded shapes, allowing to lift the roof a little bit above the windows on the top floor. And also the roof is finished with some sort of a braiding on the top, and it does have a shadow as well. So I'm going to paint that. And also the other thing that's going to be very important at this stage is to paint the windows, which are dark, the glazed part of the windows. So I'll add a little bit of blue on the top of my gray mixture so that I can paint those windows. I've basically used the same brush for the entire drawing, because this technique is often used for sketchbooks, and so when you are painting on a sketchbook outside, many times you would only have one brush and very limited colors. So that's why I was trying to put myself in that same situation. But obviously for those tiny details, if you wish, you could also use a tiny little brush, which is going to allow you to add a little bit of detail more easily. So again, here I wanted to give a little bit of a darker shade at the edge of the roof, and so I'm going to use the same technique with a darker shade of gray. I'm going to have a nice edge on the top with using the top of the brush, and then the rest of it is going to fade away. And now I'm going to use only the tip of the brush to add little dots on top of my facade, so that I can suggest the shadows that the vegetation is going to project on the facade. And so for this I'm only going to use the top of the brush and just touch the sheet of paper. Obviously I'm using watercolor paper, and so this is 300 grams paper, which handles pretty well water. But this particular drawing, it does not have much of wet on wet painting, so I think it's very much doable also on mixed technique paper. So here I think I overdid it a little bit. Possibly this darker shade I should have used like a smaller brush, or maybe hold my brush on a little bit of a more vertical manner, but anyways, it doesn't always work out exactly as planned, does it? And I think what's the most important is when you regret some parts of your painting, as I do here for my darker gray, well, the most important part is just to learn from our mistakes and try to do better next time. I'm almost done with this gray wash, and I'll let it dry now. I'll let it dry, and now the painting is dry, so it only took me like 5 minutes or so to dry it. But if you do not have time, and if you're not sketching outside, what you can do is simply use a hair dryer and blow dry it. It only takes a few seconds. When you blow dry a watercolor, you only need to be very careful if the sheet has a lot of water on it, because if you have puddles of water and you blow dry it, and then these puddles might move around the sheet of paper and give you some unpleasant surprises. But this is not the case for this one, as there is very little water involved on this painting. It's more like a sketch drawing. So I'll start by adding some green on the vegetation, and I started by the lightest. Now you can have like you can either start by the darkest and leave white areas to add the lighter nuances, or the opposite, and I tried to do the opposite on this sketch. I first added the lightest greens, almost yellow, and then gradually I will add more and more green and darker shades of green, and at the end I will add a few brushes of a mixture of blue and green for the darkest areas. There we go. Now again, it's up to you to decide how much color you need to add on your sketch. It could be very well left as it is here. So the house could very well be black and white, and then just add some green and leave it as it is. Or you can decide to add colors on the roof and the facade of the cottage house. That's what I decided to do, but really it's up to you. I think it's pretty cute as it is, with a black and white house, cottage house, and just green vegetation. I think it's very nice too, so it could be left just like that. So now I'm adding the darkest greens, and as you can see, they are like colder shades of green with a little bit of blue in it. Ideally, you should leave it dry as well once you're done with the greens. I decided to carry on without letting it dry, thinking that there was very little water on it, but I think it was a mistake, you will see, because I decided to put some color on the facade as well of the building. And so, yeah, I think probably I should have waited a little bit, but anyways. So I'm adding a little bit of brown on the roof, and then I will try to give it a little bit of volume, adding darker colors at the shaded areas, but I will let it dry a little bit before. And I'll add a little bit more brown on the masonry part, trying to add a little bit of yellow as well, so that the color is slightly different than the roof. And I'm pretty much done, really. You'll see me suggest the masonry blocks with some different colors, different shades of brown, more or less yellowish, more or less reddish. And that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. As you can see, I'll add a little bit of, I'll use like a smaller brush just to add a little bit of details on the roof and some final touches on the vegetation. So I hope you enjoyed this painting of a cottage house, this watercolor sketch of a cottage house. If you did, please do not hesitate to subscribe to the channel, as I try to publish videos like this one like every week or so. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you soon.